Welcome and thanks for joining us. My guests today are John Check, the Executive Director of the Cyber Protection Solutions at Raytheon Intelligence and Space, John DeSimone, the President of Cybersecurity Intelligence and Services at Raytheon Intelligence and Space, and James Thompson, the Director of the Raytheon Intelligence and Space Offensive Labs. Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
Let me set just a little bit of context for our discussion. In sports, the saying goes, the best offense is a better defense. In cybersecurity, that adage is becoming more appropriate by the month and by the cyber attack. Now, this is true because over the last few years, the discussion around cybersecurity hasn't just focused on defensive operations. The government and industry have become more comfortable talking about certain cyber actions and their TTPs, techniques, tactics, and procedures. It's become clear that there are definite benefits to embracing offensive operations on top of an organization's typical defensive concepts. In fact, DoD recognized this need to find that right balance and develop cyber mission forces. Of the 133 teams it's planning on developing, U.S. Cyber Command has tasked 81 teams to defensive missions, 27 teams to offensive missions, an additional 25 teams will support both offensive and defensive missions. So for how offense and defense cyber operators can work together to create more of an active defensive posture, we're going to turn to my guests. Again, I'm joined by John Check, the Executive Director of Cyber Protection Solutions at Raytheon Intelligence and Space, John DeSimone, the President of the Cybersecurity Intelligence and Services at Raytheon Intelligence and Space, and James Thompson, the Director of RI&S Offensive Labs. Let me start with John DeSimone. John, there's interesting that offense, defense should work together more. It's maybe a little bit of new viewpoint when it comes to cyber operations. Why does it matter? Why is this so important?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, in the past, Jason, that those two have always been separate, right? So, for years you couldn't even talk about offense, right? You had to use different terms called CNO or vulnerability research, and now I think it's coming out of the shadows, so to speak, and you're able to talk about what you can do, not only from an offensive standpoint to do the missions for our customers from a national security standpoint, but what can you do from an offensive standpoint to help defend your network? And that's where you start to see the integration between the offense and defense roles inside of an organization. And when you think about putting those two groups together and having them collaborate on the best postures to defend your enterprise, you start to get into the mindset of an attacker, the tools, the techniques. Understanding that helps you put a better defensive posture into your network. It also helps you understand how to combat malware in ways that you maybe never thought of in the past. So in other words, rather than just doing alerting and then figuring out how to contain and then cleanse, you can start to figure out how to go after and maybe even attack the malware that's in your network to slow it down at a faster rate. So you're not in a long period of cycle time to return to normalcy. You can go after these things really quickly. So we see it as a very important step in the future, because we do think part of defense, in the future is going to be a lot more when you hear the term active defense, so stepping out inside the boundaries of your network and being a little bit more proactive in what you can do to combat these criminals that are coming in to do bad things in the enterprise and to upset our country.
And when you describe more of an active posture, that means things like, I imagine, red teaming, blue teaming, and things more like hunting, threat hunting, using threat intelligence. Maybe give a little bit more details about what this active defense could include.
No, I think it could include all of those, right? But I also think when you think about different types of attacks. There's things that are trying to deny or degrade your operations, or there's exfil, right, to pull information out for long-term persistence kind of engagement. So as you go back and think about active defense, you can also do things that shut things down if you understand where the command and control of a given malware is at. You can shut it down at the source, maybe degrade the server's capability to actually communicate with that malware. Or you can attack your own workstations to shut it down so it doesn't proliferate throughout the organization. So there's different levels that you can do. And I think if you can understand how attackers work, coming from a posture of knowing, being one of the attackers, then it gives you the ability to figure out which levels and which different techniques you can use to stop malware as it invades your network.
This discussion we're having today is important because I think as agencies are seeing more cyber attacks, and we're waiting on the latest data from the Office of Management and Budget to know just how tough things have become over the last year or so in terms of how many incidents or potential attack vectors. What's going on? What are you all seeing today? It feels like we don't talk about cybersecurity and cyber attacks as much, but we know they're still going on. If John, Check, or James wants to jump in here as well, feel free.
Jason, I'm happy to jump in. This is John Check. Really from our perspective, we look at the lay of the land today. One of the key aspects that's really thwarting our defensive efforts, right? There's not enough cybersecurity talent to do all the roles we need them to do, whether that's implementing the latest tool or actively hunting and performing active defense activities like John DeSimone mentioned. So that artificial separation between the offensive side and the defensive side, we don't have the luxury to do that. We need, like anything, it's a team sport. We need those teams working together, actively informing each other to really do the work we need to defend our nation. We don't have a luxury. There's just not enough people, even if we wanted to have two separate teams. And without having those two sides informing each other, that's one of the key aspects that we're probably, we're still in the infancy of doing that across government today, of really understanding the true benefits of that, also understanding the limitation we have around the workforce.
John, Check, you bring up an interesting idea here of this idea that offense and defense are working together. Do they want to work together? I mean, if you watch any sports teams, and this is the best analogy I'll make, is usually the defense have, especially let's say in football, since we're almost in football season, they want to hang out on their side of the field, and the offense wants to hang out on their side of the field. And when they scrimmage, there's a lot of trash talking going on. Is there some good trash talking between offense and defensive cyber operators too?
Yes, absolutely. The offensive side always comes in, and clearly they're taking the high ground, knowing that they have the firepower. They thought up new plays that we're catching up on with the defensive side. So that's absolutely all sports analogies apply to the offense versus the defensive side. Jason, you hit exactly the nail right in the head. That is exactly the way it works. But at the end of the day, we all know we're a part of the same team, and we have the same mission, right? We're trying to defend our way of life, and we recognize that that healthy competition makes us both stronger. And that when the after action reports, when the offensive side and defensive side get together after an exercise and say, okay, here's what we did, here's what here's how we replied in the defensive side, the offensive side can really inform us of, hey, here's some things you could have done differently. Or the offensive side can also conversely provide us, the defensive side, with some feedback saying, when you did that defensive measure, that really imposed a lot of additional time on what we were trying to accomplish, or really thwarted our efforts.
Appreciate the little insights in terms of how offense and defense get together. Let me bring in James as well, because I think you are the head of the offensive lab at Raytheon Intelligence and Space. You're seeing this probably firsthand, because you probably have some defenders and offenders, if you will, together. Maybe talk a little bit about the lab and how you are ingraining this kind of spirit or this idea of offense and defense working together.
Yeah, Jason, be happy to talk about that. And one of the key features of offensive labs is building that talent that's so hard to find. Whether it's offensive or defensive, or a little bit of both. What we found throughout the years of living in these spaces is the skills that are really valuable in these arenas. There's a common set of skills. How you choose to apply those skills, either to an offensive mission or to a defensive mission, that really varies. But at the core, a firm understanding, foundational understanding of computer architecture and some of the key tenets of the security research. That's what we're trying to build with offensive labs.
The workforce piece has come up several times. John Check brought it up. James, you just brought up this idea of workforce. We've been talking about over the years. I think there was a recent study that there's a shortage of something like 66% of all cyber roles are going to be either unfilled or hard to fill over the next 3, 5, 7 years. How does finding this common set of efforts to this firm understanding of computer architecture, how does that lead into better cyber workers and even bringing in people who maybe aren't traditionally trained in cybersecurity?
Yeah, Jason, and you hit exactly where I was going to go with that. While we are very deep in the both offensive and defensive cyber research, there's a lot of adjacent fields of engineering and computer science that are not in this area today that have all of the the foundational core skills and knowledge to make the leap into this arena. I myself, my career started, as a VxWorks developer, and after being in the field for 8 years, I made the transition into cyber, and it's difficult. Even though it's the same set of skills, you've got a real learning curve that you have to overcome to be able to really succeed in this new arena. And that's where we're really trying to focus our efforts with Offensive Labs, is to make that transition easier for others, and to also for those folks that are really new into their career, to really get some momentum behind their skills, their career to be successful.
Hey, Jace, this is John B. Simone. I'd like to add, on top of what James is talking about. I mean, I think, and also what John Check said earlier, I mean, we're really running into a shortage. So what we believe, when you think about where's the shortage coming from? One, there's just an overwhelming need for more missions and to keep pace with some of our adversaries, because our adversaries have way more bodies, and they have different rules of government, so they can throw more people at it than we can. And then in our space, we've got a couple of different challenges. One, you got very elongated security processes that are going on that we have to go through, and it takes a little bit of time to get cleared talent onto these missions. And then you have, a lot of the outside influences, like from the commercial industries that are coming in and recruiting and taking away talent from this mission space. So we have to be able to manufacture talent. We can't just go out and continue to buy talent. We have to be able to grow and manufacture talent to keep pace, one. And I think the second thing, which we're trying to do with the Offensive Labs and this whole conversation we're having on offense and defense kind of working together, is we're going to need to optimize with the resources we currently have, which means we're going to need to leverage. So we're going to need to be more efficient, smarter as we work, and we're going to need to leverage the talent we have across both missions, because we can't compete, in my view, and win on a body for body kind of basis. We just can't throw more bodies at this problem and expect to win. We're going to have to get smarter. We're going to have to get more effective in what we're doing, using tools to help leverage our capabilities and really hunt down and take the fight to the adversaries to kind of strengthen our position.
Yeah, and I want to add, this is James, I want to add a little bit to that as well. One of the things that John mentioned is very key, and that's really leveraging and emphasizing the talent that we have today, in particular those that not only are new to this arena, but also those that want to pivot their career and upskill themselves, or go into a different area of security research. As it sits today, our three tenets, our skills tenets in Offensive Labs that we focus on are vulnerability research, binary reverse engineering, and computer network operations. And from there, we can supply talent to a broad range of missions. But again, getting the talent on board or upskilling our current employees is something we're really focused on.
You both mentioned tools, you mentioned people. I'm sure we'll continue that part of the conversation, but first we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation. You're listening to the discussion, Meeting the Need for Offensive and Defensive Cyber Teams, sponsored by Raytheon Intelligence and Space on Federal News Network.